listening to the Esq.Marketing podcast, hosted by Matthew Lauren, president of Esq.Marketing, where he features successful solo and SMB law firms from all over the United States. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hey, I'm Matthew Lauren, and you're listening to the Esq.Marketing podcast, where I feature successful entrepreneurs in the legal industry. This episode is brought to you by our sister publication, The Rankings podcast, with host Chris Dreyer. And speaking of successful entrepreneurs, today I have the pleasure of speaking with Natalie Harris, partner at Baron Harris Healey, a Chicago-based business litigation and intellectual property law firm. For 20 plus years, Natalie has defended clients including journalists, authors, artists, politicians, entrepreneurs, and executives from advertising agencies and well-known brands who create, publish, and broadcast content in all forms of media. Natalie, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Matthew. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to it.
Did I get the category of law firm right? Business litigation and intellectual property? I feel like
I would say when we sort of introduce ourselves out to others, we really do focus on the media defense side of what we do. You know, it definitely touches business because media clients are businesses. And when you're dealing in media, you're often dealing in intellectual property, trademark, copyright, but sort of what defines or the thread that runs through all of what we do, that our clients usually in some way or another touch media. Either they're creating it, they're working in it, or they're, publishing, broadcasting.
So is this the same as entertainment law? Would that be accurate to say or no?
It's a little bit different. And, I get asked that question all the time. Entertainment lawyers tend to work more on sort of bigger production deals, sort of more of the mechanics of financing and that sort of thing. Not always. They also tend to represent talent, individual talent, more often than we do. In other words, they have, their stable of clients and they negotiate deals for them to appear in various forms of, media, films, or whatever. There are entertainment lawyers who overlap quite a bit in what we do, but we do less of representing individual talent and more sort of defending publishers, broadcasters, authors in litigation and counseling them in connection with content that they put out into the world.
Thank you for clarifying that. So a lot of our audience are startup attorneys that are thinking about going off on their own. Take me back to the beginning. How did you get started with Baron Harris Healey?
Sure. We will be 2 years old this summer, but all three of us, Baron, Harris, and Healey, have worked together for over 15 years at another firm here in Chicago that did, not surprisingly, very similar work. And we all worked together for years, really got to know each other, really developed our own client bases. And we each have sort of personalities that are maybe atypical of lawyers. We're a little more squishy, if you will. Each of us have, we're big readers, we love film. Maybe we don't love to grind it out quite as much. And we decided, hey, the three of us are sort of different. We recognize in our friends because we have a sense that we are different in the sea of lawyers, and we've got our own business at this point in our careers. Let's make a go of it on our own and see if we can kind of create a firm modeled on the kind of people that we are. And so, like meticulous lawyers, we did plan it, very carefully. What kind of portable business did we have? What kind of space are we going to find? It's a little scary to, start your own thing mid-career in a big city. Can we pull it off? And we sort of ran the numbers and, figured out what we didn't know and, just sort of pulled the trigger.
It's a cool story. So what does the competition look like in this space? So, a lot of attorneys I talk to, they're sort of in like criminal defense or PI or something really common, but it doesn't sound like there's a ton of lawyers that do what you do.
Much more narrow area of practice. And it's funny because people who are competition are also, our professional colleagues, not necessarily at our firm. Obviously, the great majority of people who do this, there's a lot in LA. There are many in New York, as you might expect. Fewer in the Midwest, some in Florida. Overall, I'd be surprised if there are more than 25 firms that, a lot of firms maybe have a department or a guy who does this kind of work, but there are not a lot of firms that, stay afloat or generate, enough revenue to keep a business going in this kind of work. So obviously, the firm we left arguably is, competition, but we have, I think, a collegial relationship with lots of attorneys there. And to the extent there are conflicts, we're always open to sending work there, taking work, in if they can't handle it. There are a couple of big firms, giant firms, that do this work locally in Chicago, but those really aren't competition for us because, we don't have the kind of capacity to handle, massive, lawsuit. We can handle a big suit, but if it's a, giant national network, you're not going to hire a 3-person firm. It's just not going to happen. We have good relationships with people at the big firms who specialize in this work because often their rates are too high, especially, much media is hemorrhaging cash right now with the loss of classifieds and revenue streams kind of drying up. We noticed that there was sort of a hole in the market. If you're just sort of, a mid-sized media company and not a giant behemoth, who do you go to when you need advice about your content or to defend you in a lawsuit? So oftentimes the giant firms will refer us business and say, hey, listen, we've got this great person who came to us through another client. They, sort of too small potatoes for us, but, be perfect for you guys. And
Nice.
We're not offended by that. We love it.
So have you spearheaded those relationships? Do you go out and intentionally build those referral relationships with larger firms?
Definitely. I was like, one of my partners, came from a bigger firm. And so he, sort of came to the practice already having a lot of good relationships at one of the bigger firms in town that has traditionally done this kind of work. We're also really heavily involved in the 2, what I'll call trade associations for media lawyers. One is the American Bar Association Forum on Communications Law. Basically, anyone who touches this kind of work hopefully is a member or attends sort of the events and things that the ABA, we call it the ABA Forum, puts on. There's another group called the Media Law Resource Center out of New York. And they're similar. They're focused a little bit more on just media defense side work, but sort of the membership of those 2 groups, if you put them together, I think anyone who does media law in the US is a member of one, the other, or both. And so we really use the client development, and they do conferences and there's committees and they do weekly calls and there's daily newsletters, monthly newsletters. So we are fairly heavily involved with both those organizations and use those as a great place to kind of develop relationships with people in the practice, both because we like them, because they have sort of a similar nerdiness to us, and also because it's a great opportunity, to develop more business.
Yeah, referrals are so crucial for lawyers. I mean, everyone I talk to, they say that's how they start out in business, is just getting more referrals and then eventually branch out to other things. Have you guys ever thought about branching out of your niche at all?
Our niche is a nice niche to have because it has a lot of sort of related fields that you can branch off into. So, I would say my bread and butter, what I love to do best is to defend defamation. That's sort of legal word for libel. I like to defend a defamation case on behalf of someone who published or broadcast some kind of content that's made someone angry. But sort of related work includes, defending trademark infringement, copyright infringement, anything that sort of deals with content that someone creates. We also do, review of advertising for, risk for false advertising, and make sure that you're compliant with other guides that the Federal Trade Commission puts out with respect to, fair advertising and disclosure. So we do a lot of things that are, sort of surround the core media work. I think another related area is sort of data privacy, which is sort of a real buzzword right now, and obviously really important since media and data are now sort of forever interlinked. And, what the privacy rules that exist are expanding almost every day. I would say we haven't yet sort of dipped our toe into that area. There's some, specialty certifications and classes you can take to sort of become a certified expert on data privacy. And so if we're thinking of moving into a new quasi-related area, it'd probably be that.
You mentioned defending against defamation. Our marketing director mentioned a case that you had from somebody famous that was similar, or that was in that vein.
I did. I had the great honor to represent Rose McGowan, who many know is an actress and an activist who likes to speak her mind. And she hired us, and we got some assistance from a fund that helps, defend people who have been the victims of sexual harassment. And she found herself on the receiving end of a defamation claim from a former lawyer who she had retained in connection with another matter, who subsequently, while she was still that person's client, did engage Harvey Weinstein as a client without letting her know. And so she, voiced her opinion about that and made it known that she thought it was a conflict of interest, and, took to social media, as she's wont to do, and spoke her mind about it. And the lawyer got angry and sued her. And we won. We made the argument that the comments that she made about, her opinion about his choice to defend her abuser while also having her as a client was just that, her opinion. It wasn't false fact, and therefore he couldn't prevail on a defamation claim. So that was really an interesting one.
Yeah, that's awesome. What has been one of the most eye-opening experiences of starting your own firm? Something you didn't expect?
I think, to your point from earlier, maybe it was before we were online here, but this idea that in law school you really do learn some basics of how to think differently as a lawyer, but how nobody ever talks to you about the mechanics of a business. And that if you graduate law school and you work for a firm, or I assume too, if you work, in-house at a company, or especially for the government, you never have any exposure kind of to how the business sausage is made, if you will. How do you manage the finances? How do you, should you have an employee? Should you not? What are the benefits of having of-counsel relationships? What software should I use to manage, the content that we create? How do I create a conflict system so that I know that I'm not representing someone who's directly adverse to somebody else? Where do you store your documents so that you can search everything? A spreadsheet is not a great idea to manage, the business side of your. What is the key thing you need when you start? I will answer that. It is a bookkeeper. So none of those businessy things were anything, frankly, that I had ever contemplated. And I am lucky that one of my partners has worked, has a different family business that he's worked on for a long time. So he had a little bit of sense of at least to know what we didn't know and where we should hire experts. And I would say what I learned more than anything is that you are a lawyer and you must have an understanding of how all these things work, but you must not waste your time trying to do them all, right? I should not be drafting a ton of our website content. We should not be reconciling our, books every month as lawyers. That doesn't make any sense. It makes good sense, assuming you can afford it, to pay someone who has expertise to handle that kind of stuff for you, which is scary as a lawyer because you want to do everything.
Yes. Yeah. And even as, anyone running a business, the knee-jerk reaction is just do it yourself. And it's almost like, even though it's not, it feels like you're giving up in a way by outsourcing the work to somebody else.
I think that's right. And as a lawyer, too, you sort of pride yourself on, knowing it all or being able to handle it all or figure it all out. And it's really, frankly, I think, a more impressive skill to know to get that sense of this is something that needs to be handed off and I will be doing everyone a favor, especially as a lawyer when you sell your time, right? It will absolutely never make sense for you to spend an hour of your time, tracking down an invoice or something like that, when you could be billing that out, doing legal research or reviewing a contract. So you got to learn to teach yourself when to stop and hand it off.
Great advice. What is one piece of advice you'd give to somebody thinking of starting their own law practice? If a friend came to you and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about going off on my own," what would you tell them?
The number one, I guess there's sort of two things. I think one is look yourself in the mirror and ask, do you have the personality for this, right? There are a lot of people who are great lawyers, really smart, could run circles around me, in terms of briefing complex issues, but they're not necessarily social, or they're not necessarily great at sort of the business development angle of the practice. And if you don't like to go to a cocktail party, if you are not truly in your heart sort of engaged in meeting other people and get excited about the idea of bringing in new business, and you really, feel more comfortable having work fed to you, I would think again. And I would also, ask yourself, do the math. How much can you reasonably collect this year? and how much is it going to cost you to run that business? And if you have only a vague figure, another alarm bell should go off. You need to have an actual spreadsheet and real numbers about what it's going to cost and what you can bring in. And if you come out on the plus side, give it a go.
Have you had that discussion with your partners about bringing in new business and generating, I guess, leads for the firm? Do you guys have a strategy that you go after? Like, hey, we need to go to X number of events this month, or do X number of phone calls this month to our referral network to try to see if we can drum up new business?
We do. It's funny. We've sort of developed it over time, just from our own, we each have experiences at a bunch of different legal workplaces. And we've decided that we do a monthly meeting where we sit down, back in the day in person, now remotely / in person. And one of the big agenda items that we talk about each month is business development. So what have we brought in, just so everybody is aware of what everybody else is working on. And then we talk in more detail about, okay, what steps are we going to take to generate more business? One thing that we do, and this is no secret to anyone, is we follow the docket, which is sort of the published cases that get filed in Chicago and the Northern District of Illinois, which is the federal court, every day. We each review them, and we review them to see, first of all, if any existing clients that we know got sued. We also review them to see if clients that we don't have got sued in areas that are our specialty. Like, if we see a defamation case against a media company, but it's not a media company we've represented, we immediately sort of look to our networks to see if we're connected in any way. Obviously, we can't directly solicit because the ethical rules, prohibit that, but we look to see, do we have another lawyer friend who maybe does a different kind of work for that client and can introduce us and say, hey, I've got a friend over at Baron Harris Healey. All they do is defamation. They're your people. Let me introduce you. So I spend time literally every day doing that and reaching out to various things that look like they might be in our wheelhouse and working my network.
So you could reach out to like personal contacts and say, hey, notice this was happening.
So the rule is, it varies by state, but generally, the rule is you can't directly reach out to a client to solicit business. It's sort of the ambulance chasing rule, unless you already have an existing relationship. So if it's somebody I know, a friend from school, or a friend of the family, or, somebody who would know my name, I can directly reach out. The other exception is if they're a lawyer. So I can find a general counsel, someone who's an in-house lawyer at that firm. If I know them, or even if I don't know them, I can reach out to them. So the idea is they know enough about what I'll be doing in a pitch that they won't be bamboozled. And the other thing is you can certainly go through a third party who has a personal relationship or a business relationship. So that's what I try and do, is find someone who I know well, who also might know them, who could introduce me. So it avoids there being a direct solicitation, but gives me the opportunity to get in touch with them.
That's super smart, following the docket. I've never heard of that before. That's a really great strategy. So, Natalie, where do you see the future of the firm going? What are your guys' goals for next 5 years?
I think we'd really like to grow in terms of adding an associate or two. At the moment, just the three of us, three partners, and we do have two of counsel attorneys who we love and have worked with for a long time and both worked with before at our old firm. And they help us with overflow and sort of things that maybe aren't quite in our area of specialty that they do. But my two partners I'm 46 and they're a good decade older than I am. So we're sort of thinking long-term, what does this look like? If you're not growing, right, you're failing or something like that. So
something
our
like
idea,
that.
And I think we got through a year of COVID and we are doing quite well. So I think our hope is as time goes on that we will get to have the capacity and the workflow to support, a couple of associates. And frankly, I'd like to really focus on trying to hire women who are interested in having sort of a non-traditional flexible schedule, because there's so many smart women I went to law school with and practiced with who dropped out because the, structure of firm life is just not conducive to living a life or having kids. And so a lot of women just say, not interested. So I'd like to create an environment where both women and frankly people of color who I think have been pushed out of the legal market in a lot of ways, or pushed into certain practices, or are just way underrepresented in my field in particular. I'd like to make our place a firm where women and people of color could come and work, be exposed to the work, and thrive.
That's really cool. That's at the forefront for you because, I mean, I finished my BA taking care of 2 kids at home as a stay-at-home dad, and man, that's the hardest thing I ever had to do. So yeah, I get it. Like affording opportunities like that to people who had to bootstrap and struggle. That's really cool. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to Natalie Harris, partner at Baron Harris and Healey. Natalie, where can people go to learn more about your law firm?
Our obvious spot is our website. So we are at bhhlawfirm.com. Check out our LinkedIn profile. We've got cool news items on the website that I push out to LinkedIn that gives you a sense of what we've been doing, what we've been working on, tells you a little bit more about each of us and our backgrounds. And we are, open door. It's just us. Give us a call. Always happy to chat. I always say this to people that if you have a question that touches on what we do and you just want to give a call and, ask me some questions, I'm actually a human being and I'm happy to do that. So welcome those kind of calls. They're always fun and interesting.
That's great. Thanks, Natalie. Thanks for being on the show.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the ESQ Marketing Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.